We thought school was closing early. Then we saw the zombies. I remember the exact moment everything changed because I was failing a pop quiz in Mr. Henderson's AP chemistry class. Third row, second seat from the window. I had my pencil pressed against the paper so hard, the graphite tip snapped. And I was staring at a question about covalent bonds when Principal Durkin's voice crackled over the intercom. His tone was wrong. I'd heard that man speak at every assembly, every fire drill, every mundane announcement about parking lot rules for 4 years. He always sounded like he was reading a cereal box. But that afternoon, his voice carried something I'd never heard from an authority figure in that building. He was afraid. All students and staff, we are implementing an immediate early dismissal. Please gather your belongings calmly and proceed to your designated exits. Buses are being called. Parents have been notified. This is effective immediately. The room erupted. 32 seniors dropped their pencils simultaneously. Chairs scraped linoleum. Mr. Henderson stood up from his desk and held both palms outward like he was trying to physically hold back the chaos. Settle down. You heard him. Gather your things, orderly. My friend Kai leaned across the aisle. His dark eyes were lit with that specific excitement teenagers feel when routine breaks. Dude, what do you think? Gas leak? Bomb threat? No idea, I said, shoving my notebook into my bag. Durkin sounded weird, though. Weird how? Like he was trying not to scream. That should have been my first real warning. But I was 17. Early dismissal meant freedom. It meant the afternoon opened up like a gift. I didn't think about why. I thought about what I'd do with the extra hours. The hallway flooded with bodies. Over 1,000 students poured from classrooms into corridors designed for orderly transitions between periods, not mass exodus. Lockers banged open, sneakers squeaked against tile. The noise was enormous, a roar of voices and movement, and that particular teenage energy that doesn't understand danger because it hasn't met it yet. I found my girlfriend Mara at her locker near the east stairwell. She was already packed, her red backpack over one shoulder, phone in hand, scrolling furiously. Her face told me something was wrong before she spoke. Nate, look at this. She turned the screen toward me. A local news notification. The headline read, "Multiple incidents of violent attacks reported in Tri-County area. Residents advised to shelter in place." Shelter in place, I repeated. But they're sending us home. That's what I'm saying. Mara's jaw was tight. She had this way of processing fear through anger, through sharpness. It made her seem fearless when she was actually terrified. If it's shelter in place, why aren't they keeping us here? I didn't have an answer. The hallway current was pulling us toward the main entrance. I grabbed her hand and we moved with it, bodies pressed on all sides. Someone's elbow caught my ribs. A freshman was crying near the water fountain. 2 teachers stood at the intersection of B Hall and the main corridor, directing traffic with tight smiles and rigid gestures. Then I saw Coach Briggs. He was a massive man, 6'4", former college linebacker, the kind of presence that made freshmen change direction in hallways. He was standing at the double doors that led to the rear parking lot, and he wasn't directing anyone. He was blocking the doors. His face was gray, not pale. Gray, like the blood had been replaced with something colder. "Coach," I said as we passed. He looked at me but didn't really see me. His eyes went past, toward whatever was beyond those doors. "Go out the front," he said. "Only the front." "Why?" "Go out the front, Nate." Mara pulled my arm. We kept moving. But I looked back once, and I saw Coach Briggs reach for his keys. He locked those doors, Then he pushed a heavy recycling bin in front of them. And his hands were shaking so badly, the keys slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. That was the moment my body knew what my brain hadn't accepted yet. Something was already here. The front entrance was chaos, organized only by the thin authority of Vice Principal Okafor, who stood on the top step with a megaphone, calling bus numbers. Her voice was professional, but her cadence was too fast. She was rushing through numbers, skipping her usual pauses, not waiting for confirmation before calling the next. Bus 12. Bus 12 now. Bus 7 right behind. If your parent is in the pickup lane, go directly. Do not wait on the lawn. Do not gather in groups. I didn't ride the bus. Mara didn't either. We both drove, and our cars were in the senior lot on the west side of the building. But the west side was behind the school, and Coach Briggs had locked those doors. "We'll go around," I said. Kai appeared beside us, breathing hard, his basketball bag slung diagonally across his chest. "You guys see the parking lot?" "No. What?" I went up to the second floor to grab my Spanish book. I looked out the window. He swallowed. "There are people in the back lot, but they're not moving right." "What do you mean, not moving right?" Mara asked. "Like they're hurt or drunk. There's maybe 6 or 7 of them just standing near the dumpsters. And one of them..." He stopped. His hand went to his mouth briefly, like he was holding something back. One of them was on the ground, with somebody else on top of them. And it wasn't a fight. My stomach turned, but my brain refused the image. "Come with us. We'll go around the east side to the senior lot." We pushed through the crowd flowing down the front steps and cut left along the building's exterior. The afternoon was bright, absurdly beautiful. October in Virginia means red gold trees and that crisp air that smells like apples and chimney smoke. It was the kind of afternoon that should have held nothing but promise. I remember the sun on my face as we rounded the corner, and I remember how wrong it felt to be warm. The east side of Jefferson High faces the athletic fields, the track, the football field, the bleachers, the equipment shed, normally empty during school hours. But today, crossing the 50-yard line with a stumbling, broken gait, was a woman in a hospital gown. We all stopped. She was maybe 200 yards away, far enough to seem small, close enough to see that the gown was soaked through with something dark from the chest down. Her feet were bare. Her arms hung at angles that suggested the bones inside had been rearranged. And she was moving toward the school. "Is that?" Kai started. "Keep moving," I said. "Senior lot, now." We moved faster. The senior lot appeared as we rounded the building's northwest corner. My truck was there, 4th row. The blue F-150 my dad and I had rebuilt the previous summer. Mara's Civic was 2 rows closer, both untouched, both waiting. But between us and the vehicles were 3 more of them. They stood in the lot like they'd forgotten why they came. A man in mechanic's coveralls, a teenage girl still wearing a fast food uniform, visor and all, and someone so damaged I couldn't identify anything about them beyond the fact that they were upright and shouldn't have been. Mara's hand tightened on mine until her nails broke skin. "The mechanic one," Kai whispered. "That's Mr. Langford. He works at the Sunoco on Route 9. He was right. I recognized the name patch on the coveralls. Doug. I'd seen him 100 times filling up the truck. He'd always called me Chief and asked about my dad. Doug's head turned toward us. Not his body, just his head, rotating slowly on a neck that seemed to have too much flexibility. His mouth opened and a sound came out that I will never be able to adequately describe. Not a moan, not a scream, a wet, guttural vibration that came from somewhere deeper than lungs. The others turned at his sound. I had my keys in my hand. 60 yards to the truck. "Run," I said. We ran. My legs found a gear I didn't know existed. Sneakers slapped asphalt. Mara was fast, always had been from years of track, and she pulled ahead of me within seconds. Kai was beside me, his longer stride eating ground despite the heavy bag bouncing against his back. The infected, because that's what they were, even if I didn't have that word yet, reacted to our movement with a delay. Like the signal from their eyes to their legs had to travel through damaged wiring. Doug lurched first. His body pivoted with a stiffness that looked painful, mechanical, wrong. The fast food girl followed, her head snapping toward us with more speed than her body could match. The third one, the damaged one, simply collapsed and began crawling. I reached my truck, ripped the door open. Mara was already at her Civic, fumbling with her key fob. The chirp of her lock sounded like a gunshot in the strange quiet that existed beneath our own panicked breathing. "Kai, get in!" I shouted. He didn't need to be told twice. He threw himself into the passenger seat and slammed the door so hard the truck rocked. I jammed the key into the ignition. My truck was old enough to need a physical key, and turned. The engine caught on the first try, the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. In the rearview mirror, Doug was 20 feet away now, closer than I'd calculated, faster than that initial lurch had suggested. His mouth was still open, and that sound was still coming out, joined now by the fast food girl's higher-pitched version, a chorus I never wanted to hear again. I threw the truck into reverse, swung wide, shifted to drive, and punched it. Mara's Civic was already moving, pulling out of her spot with a screech of tires. We formed a 2-car convoy heading for the lot exit, and as I turned onto the access road, I saw the rear view fill with more of them, emerging from the tree line behind the school, coming from the direction of the hospital 3 blocks away, coming from the neighborhood that backed up to the athletic fields. There were dozens, maybe more. "Oh God," Kai said. He was twisted in his seat, watching through the rear window. Nate, there's so many." "Don't look. Call your mom." He pulled his phone out with shaking hands. Dialed, waited. His face told me the answer before he spoke. "Straight to voicemail." I grabbed my own phone from the cup holder and handed it to him. "Try my dad." He dialed. Same result. Mara was ahead of me on Jefferson Boulevard, and she hit her brakes suddenly. I nearly rear-ended her. Then I saw why. The road was blocked, not by infected, by cars. A massive pileup stretched across both lanes. It looked like 5 or 6 vehicles had collided at the intersection of Jefferson and Main. One was on fire, black smoke curling upward in a lazy pillar. Another was flipped entirely on its roof, wheels still spinning. People were scattered around the wreckage. Some were helping, some were running, some were neither. Mara's window rolled down, and she stuck her arm out, waving me to pull alongside. I did. "I can't get through," she shouted across the gap. "And look, on the other side of the pileup." I looked. Beyond the crashed cars, on the Main Street side, a cluster of infected were feeding. That's the only word. Feeding. On someone who had crawled from one of the wrecked vehicles and hadn't made it far enough. "Kai," I said, "directions to Mara's house. What's the back route?" "Cut through the Meadowbrook subdivision. Take Elm to Birch to her street." I honked once at Mara and pointed left. She nodded. We turned together, leaving Jefferson Boulevard and its carnage behind. The subdivision streets were eerily empty. Pristine lawns, parked minivans, a sprinkler still running in someone's yard, casting tiny rainbows across grass that didn't know the world was ending. We drove at 40 in a 25 zone, and I watched every shadow between every house. Mara's neighborhood appeared in 3 minutes. Her street looked normal, quiet, safe. It wouldn't stay that way. Mara's house was a split-level colonial on a cul-de-sac called Wren Court. 5 houses on the street, all similar. Upper middle-class Virginia suburb perfection. Her parents were both at work, her mom at the hospital, her dad at a law office downtown. Neither answered their phones. We pulled into the driveway and Mara was out of her car before I'd even shifted into park, running for the front door with her keys already extended. Inside, the house was silent and cold. The AC was running. The kitchen clock ticked. Everything was in its place. Clean counters, a coffee mug in the sink, a note on the fridge from her dad about dinner plans that would never happen. Mara went straight for the television. CNN filled the screen and we stood there, the 3 of us, bags still on our shoulders, watching the world collapse in high definition. The anchor was maintaining composure, but barely. The chyron read, "Widespread violent incidents across eastern seaboard. Cause unknown. Authorities urge shelter in place." Behind her, the screen showed helicopter footage of a highway, Surrey Y-95, based on the signage, and it was a parking lot of abandoned vehicles. Among them, small figures moved in that unmistakable broken way. "It's everywhere," Kai said quietly. "This isn't just here." My phone buzzed. A text from my older sister Jess, who lived in D.C. Just 2 words. "Are you safe?" I typed back, "At Mara's house. You?" Her response came immediately. "Locked in apartment. Don't go outside. It's bad here. Really bad. Love you." I stared at that message. My sister didn't say love you in texts. She said it at Christmas and birthdays, and when one of us was getting on a plane. The casualness of it in a text message terrified me more than anything I'd seen in the parking lot. "We need to secure this house," I said. The words came from somewhere practical inside me, some part that had apparently been preparing for this without my knowledge. "Lock every door, every window, close blinds." Mara was already moving. She knew this house like her own body, knew every entry point, every vulnerability. Back sliding door has a bar lock. Basement windows don't open. First floor has 6 windows that open. I'll handle upstairs. "Kai, help me with the first floor." We moved through the house systematically. I locked windows I'd climbed through a dozen times to visit Mara when her parents were strict about weeknight visits. I closed blinds over glass. I'd watched 4th of July fireworks through. Every familiar surface now evaluated for structural integrity rather than memory. The doorbell rang at 4:47 p.m. We froze. I crept to the front window and peeled back the curtain. It was 2 people. A woman in her 40s holding the hand of a boy who looked about 10. The woman was our neighbor, not mine, Mara's. Mrs. Alderman from 2 houses down. The boy was her son, Devin. They looked unharmed, but completely shattered. Mrs. Alderman's mascara had run in tracks down both cheeks. Devin was pressing his face into her hip, his small body trembling visibly. I opened the door. "Please," Mrs. Alderman said. Just that word. It carried everything. "Come in, quick." They entered and I locked the door behind them. Mrs. Alderman collapsed onto the entryway bench and pulled Devin onto her lap, wrapping both arms around him like she could physically shield him from reality. "Helen," Mara said gently, kneeling in front of her. What happened? My husband, she said. Kevin went to check on the sounds from the Petersons' house. He didn't come back. I watched from the window. I saw. Her eyes went to Devin and she stopped. I saw enough. I took Devin and I came here because your cars were in the driveway and I didn't know where else to go. Devin looked up at me. His eyes were dry but enormous. The Petersons' dog was screaming, he said. Dogs don't scream. I didn't have a response to that. There wasn't one. By 6 p.m., our group had grown to 8. After Mrs. Alderman and Devin, 2 more neighbors arrived separately. First came Marcus Webb, a retired Marine who lived at the end of the cul-de-sac. He showed up carrying a baseball bat and a first aid kit. His gray hair buzzed close to his skull, his posture suggesting a man who'd been waiting decades for the world to give him a reason to use his training again. Then came the Delgado sisters, Sophia and Carmen, both college age, home for fall break from different schools. They'd been together when the news broke and had walked from their parents' house 3 streets over when they saw infected gathering near their backyard fence. Their parents were at work, unreachable. The 8 of us gathered in Mara's living room with the curtains drawn and the television muted, but still showing the same looping footage. CNN had lost their DC feed. A local affiliate was running emergency broadcast graphics. The internet was slowing, pages loading in fragments, but enough information was getting through to paint the picture. Whatever this was had started at medical facilities, hospitals, clinics, nursing homes. Patients who died were reanimating. The word zombie wasn't being used by anyone official, but it was scrolling through every social media feed, still functioning. The infection spread through bites, through fluid transfer, through wounds. Death followed within hours. Reanimation followed death within minutes. Marcus stood at the kitchen island with a notepad, taking stock. He'd assumed a quiet authority that none of us challenged because none of us wanted the responsibility. Food, he said, pen moving. What do we have? Mara opened the pantry. My mom shops weekly. We're stocked pretty well. Canned goods, rice, pasta, cereal. Probably enough for 8 people for 5 days if we ration. Water? Tap's still running. It won't be forever. Fill every container you can find. Bathtubs, pots, anything with a lid. He looked at me. Son, you drove here. How much gas in that truck? 3/4 tank. The Civic? Mara checked her memory. Maybe half. Good. Those stay parked unless we absolutely need to move. He wrote something else down. Weapons. I've got the bat. What else? I thought about Mara's house. Her dad has golf clubs in the garage. There's a toolbox with a hammer, a crowbar, kitchen knives. I have a hunting knife in my kit, Marcus added. No firearms in this house? Mara shook her head. My parents aren't gun people. Mine neither, said Mrs. Alderman, still holding Devin on the couch. I have my dad's shotgun at our house, Sophia offered. He keeps it in the bedroom closet. I know where the shells are. Marcus looked at her appraisingly. Can you use it? He taught us both. She glanced at Carmen, who nodded. Tomorrow, Marcus said. If things haven't resolved, we make a run to your house. 3 streets isn't far, but we don't move in the dark. That was the first rule established in what would become many. No movement after dark. It sounds simple, even obvious. But in those first hours, when we still believed this might be contained by morning, it felt almost theatrical, like we were playing parts in a scenario too extreme to be real. Kai was in the corner, still trying his mother's phone. Every few minutes he'd dial, wait, disconnect, dial again. The repetition was painful to watch. Finally, Sophia walked over and put a hand on his arm. "Hey," she said, "save your battery." He looked at her like she'd said something cruel, then looked at his phone, 9%, and nodded. He plugged it into a charger on the end table and sat back. His face was doing something I'd never seen from Kai, a systematic shutting down of expression that left him looking older and emptier. Devin fell asleep on his mother's lap around 8. The rest of us stayed awake, listening to the sounds outside change. By midnight, the distant sirens had stopped entirely. That silence was worse than any sound the infected had made. Morning came gray and still. I hadn't slept. None of us had really slept, though Mara had dozed against my shoulder on the living room floor for an hour, around 3 a.m. The television showed only the emergency broadcast screen now. That familiar colored bars pattern with the scrolling text advising citizens to remain indoors and await instruction from FEMA. Marcus was already up, standing at the kitchen window with a coffee mug, watching the cul-de-sac through a gap in the blinds. I joined him. "See anything?" I whispered. 3 of them at the end of the street. They've been there since about 4, just standing, not moving toward the houses. What are they waiting for? They're not waiting. They're idle, like machines on standby. He sipped his coffee, grimaced. Stimuli activate them. Sound, movement, probably scent. Without input, they just stop. How do you know that? He glanced at me. Because I watched one stand in the same spot for 4 hours without moving an inch. And because last night, when that car alarm went off on the next street, all 3 of their heads turned toward it simultaneously. They moved toward the sound. Took about 20 minutes for them to drift back. This was useful information. Vital even. I filed it somewhere in my brain that was rapidly constructing new categories for survival data. "The gun run," I said, "to the Delgado house. We go at 10, full daylight. 3 people, me, you, and one of the sisters." "Why me?" "Because you're young, fast, and you've already proven you don't freeze under pressure. That parking lot yesterday, a lot of grown men would have locked up." I didn't feel brave. I felt like I'd been running on adrenaline for 18 hours, and the tank was nearly empty. But I nodded. At 10, Marcus, Sophia, and I stood at Mara's back door. The route was planned. Through the backyard, over the fence into the Hendersons' yard, across their property to Maple Street, 3 houses down to the Delgados. Sophia had her keys. Marcus had the bat. I had a 9-iron from the garage. "We move fast and quiet," Marcus said. "If we encounter them, we don't engage unless cornered. We go around, always around, understand?" Sophia and I both confirmed. Mara kissed me at the door. Quick, hard, her hand on my jaw. "Come back," she said. It wasn't a request. It was an order, delivered with the same steel she'd used to close every blind in the house 12 hours ago. The October air hit us, and it smelled wrong. Not rot, not yet. Something chemical, like the residue after fireworks, sulfurous and sharp, mixed with something organic underneath. The sky was overcast, filtering the light into a flat gray that made everything look like a photograph with the saturation dialed down. We moved through Mara's backyard, and I boosted Sophia over the fence. She was light and quick, landing silently on the other side. Marcus went next, harder given his size and age, but he cleared it with a grunt. I went last, pulling myself over and dropping into dead leaves. The Henderson property was empty. Their cars were gone, suggesting they'd evacuated early. Smart. The back door hung open, and I saw a kitchen inside with no lights on and cereal bowls still on the table. A family that left mid-breakfast. We crossed their yard and reached the short wooden fence that separated them from the next property on Maple Street. This was where our sightlines opened up. Maple was a straight road, no curves, good visibility in both directions. One infected was visible. An elderly man in pajamas, standing in the middle of the road about 100 yards to our left. Perfectly still, standby mode. Marcus held up a fist. Military gesture. We stopped. He pointed to the right. The Delgado house was that direction, third one down. We could stay on this side of the fence, moving through backyards parallel to Maple, and arrive without ever touching the street. We moved. Silent, purposeful. My golf club felt inadequate but solid in my grip. My heartbeat was a metronome counting down to something I couldn't name. The Delgado house was untouched. A 2-story craftsman with a blue door and a wraparound porch. Sophia let us in through the back, and we moved through rooms still frozen in the mundane. A laptop open on the dining table showing a spreadsheet. A pair of reading glasses folded on an armrest. The dishwasher mid-cycle, now silent because the power had died at some point during the night. Sophia moved upstairs with purpose. I heard a closet door slide open, the metallic sound of a gun case being unlocked. She returned carrying a Remington 870 pump-action shotgun and a box of shells, 12-gauge, 20 rounds. Marcus took the weapon, checked the chamber with practiced hands, and nodded. This changes our defensive capability significantly, but it also changes our risk profile. A single shot from this will draw every one of those things within half a mile. Last resort, Sophia said. Last resort, he agreed. We filled a duffel bag with additional supplies. Canned food from the pantry, batteries, a flashlight, a small transistor radio that ran on double A's, a blanket from the couch. Sophia grabbed 2 framed photos from the mantel, her parents', and tucked them into the bag without comment. The return trip was uneventful. The elderly infected on Maple hadn't moved. We retraced our steps through backyards and arrived at Mara's fence within 15 minutes. The whole mission had taken less than 40 minutes. It felt like we'd been gone for hours. Back inside, the group convened around the kitchen island. Marcus laid out the shotgun and shells. The mood shifted perceptibly. Having a real weapon changed something psychological in the room. People sat up straighter. Devin stared at the gun with wide eyes until Mrs. Alderman turned his head away gently. New situation, Marcus said. We have defense capability, but our food timeline hasn't changed. 5 days for 8 people, less if we want to maintain any kind of strength. So, what's the plan? Kai asked. He looked rough. Dark circles under his eyes, his normally precise haircut disheveled. Do we wait for rescue? Do we leave? The radio, Marcus said, clicking on the transistor. Static. He turned the dial slowly. More static. Then, faintly, a recorded loop. Proceed to designated evacuation centers. The following locations are active. George Mason Community Center, Route 7. Fairfax County Government Center, Main Street. That's 10 miles from here, Mara said. Closer to 12 by road, I added. But if the roads look like Jefferson Boulevard. We'd need to go on foot, Marcus finished. 12 miles through potentially hostile territory with a child, 2 unarmed civilians, and limited ammunition. The room went quiet. Everyone was calculating something different. Mrs. Alderman was looking at Devin. Sophia was looking at Carmen. Kai was looking at the floor. And Mara was looking at me, because she knew what I was thinking before I said it. We can't stay here indefinitely, I said. Marcus is right about the food, and the water could go any time. If it's a government evacuation center, there'll be security. Military. Real protection. If it's still operational, Carmen said. Her voice was thin and careful. That recording could be hours old. Days old. We don't know. We don't, I admitted. But what's our alternative? Wait until the food runs out and we're too weak to make the trip. Marcus tapped the counter with one finger. His marine brain was processing, weighing variables with a discipline I envied. We don't have to decide today. We have 3 days of comfortable supply, 2 more if we ration hard. I say we observe for 24 more hours, see if the situation evolves. If rescue is coming, they'll reach the suburbs before the week's out. If not, we plan the route and move. It was reasonable, democratic, safe. Everyone nodded. But 24 hours would prove that none of our assumptions were accurate. The situation evolved, but not in our favor. By that second afternoon, the infected population on Wren Court had tripled. Where 3 had stood at idle the previous night, now 8 or 9 shuffled in loose patterns around the cul-de-sac. They moved like flotsam caught in a slow current. Drifting, aimless, occasionally bumping into a mailbox or a parked car and redirecting without reaction. But more concerning was what I observed from the upstairs window at 2 p.m. A group of 4 came from the east, moving together. Not in coordinated formation, but in response to the same distant stimulus. A car horn, maybe, or a scream too far away for us to hear. They passed through our street and continued west. And as they passed, 2 of the existing infected on our street fell into step behind them. They were accumulating. Not intentionally, not with intelligence, but by simple behavioral mechanics. Follow movement, follow sound. They were forming groups, and groups were exponentially more dangerous than individuals. I reported this to Marcus. He watched for an hour through the binoculars he'd found in Mara's father's study, then came downstairs with a modified timeline. We leave tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., first light. Nobody argued. The math had changed. Staying was no longer the safe option. Staying was watching a noose tighten. That evening, we prepared. Marcus drew a route on a paper map, actual paper, pulled from a road atlas in the garage that avoided main roads entirely. Through residential streets, across a section of Fairfax County parkland, along a creek bed that would give us cover and a water source, then approaching the community center from the south where tree cover was heaviest. 12 miles on foot with stops, he said. Figure 6 to 8 hours, depending on obstacles. We leave at 6. We arrive by mid-afternoon. What do we do about Devon? Mrs.? Alderman asked. Her son was in the next room watching a movie on a tablet with the volume low. He can't walk 12 miles. I can carry him for stretches, I offered. So can I, Kai added. Marcus nodded. We rotate. He walks when he can. We carry when he can't. It'll slow us down, but not critically. Weapons distribution, Sophia said. All business. Marcus takes the shotgun. I want a melee weapon, the crowbar. I'll keep the 9-iron, I said. I'll take the hammer, Kai said, surprising me. His voice had a new quality to it, hardened, committed. Whatever shut down inside him the first night had been replaced by something angular and determined. Mara chose a chef's knife from the kitchen block. A good one, 8 inches of German steel. I'm not swinging a golf club, she said. I need something I can actually use up close if I have to. Carmen took the bat. Mrs. Alderman refused a weapon but agreed to carry the supply bag and manage Devon. That left the group divided into combatants and non-combatants. a distinction that felt medieval in a way that turned my stomach. We packed the essentials into 3 bags distributed among the strongest carriers. Food for 2 days, water bottles, the first aid kit, the radio, the ammunition, flashlights, and a change of clothes for Devon, because Mrs. Alderman insisted, and nobody had the heart to argue. That night, I stood watch from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m., while the others slept. Mara's house was dark, except for the single candle I kept burning on the kitchen counter. Outside, the infected had settled into their standby state again, motionless shapes in the blue darkness of the cul-de-sac. I counted 11. At 3:17 a.m., I heard something I hadn't heard before. From somewhere distant, a mile, maybe 2, a sound like a horn. Not a car horn, deeper, longer, almost musical in its resonance. It lasted about 5 seconds and then stopped. Every infected on the street turned their heads north simultaneously. Then they went still again. I didn't know what that sound meant. I still don't, not entirely. But it introduced a variable that my survival calculations hadn't accounted for. Organization from an external source. We left at 6:04 a.m., 4 minutes behind schedule because Mrs. Alderman couldn't find Devon's inhaler and refused to leave without it, a decision I initially resented and would later be grateful for. The morning was cold enough to see our breath, and fog clung to the ground in patches that reduced visibility to roughly 30 feet in the low areas. Marcus led. I was second. Then Mara, Kai, Mrs. Alderman with Devon, Carmen, and Sophia at the rear. A line of 8 humans threading between houses, stepping over fences, moving through a suburban landscape that now felt like hostile territory. The first 2 miles were almost peaceful. We moved through backyards and side streets without encountering a single infected. The fog actually helped. If we couldn't see far, neither could they respond to distant visual stimuli. Our footfalls were soft on grass, and our breathing was controlled. Devon walked without complaint, his small hand gripping his mother's. Then we reached Oakmont Park, the greenway that would take us off residential streets and into the wooded creek corridor. The park entrance had a parking lot, and the parking lot was occupied. A school bus sat at an angle across 2 spaces. Its yellow paint was dulled by the gray morning. Its stop sign was still extended. Its door was open. And around it, moving in slow patterns, were at least 20 infected. Some were small, child-sized. Mrs. Alderman made a sound, a short, involuntary intake of breath, and pressed Devon's face into her jacket. Marcus held up his fist. We stopped behind a privacy fence at the park's border, peering through gaps in the wooden slats. "The creek entrance is on the other side of that lot," Marcus whispered, about 200 yards past the bus. "We can't go through that," Carmen said. Her face was white. "We don't go through. We go around." Marcus traced a path with his finger along the fence line. "This fence runs another 100 yards east. It'll put us at the edge of the park near the tennis courts. From there, we can cut through the woods to reach the creek without entering the lot." It added distance, maybe 20 minutes of additional travel. But the alternative was walking through a crowd of the dead, some of whom had been children on their way home from school. We moved along the fence, slowly, each footstep placed with deliberate care. The fence boards were old, and some were loose. One creaked when Sophia's bag brushed it, and we all froze for 10 seconds until it was clear nothing had reacted. At the tennis courts, Marcus led us into the tree line. The woods were dense enough to swallow us within 20 paces. Pine needles cushioned our steps. The fog was thicker here, trapped by the canopy, and the world reduced to a gray-green tunnel of trunks and branches. We found the creek in 15 minutes. It was maybe 5 feet wide, ankle deep, running clear over smooth stones. Marcus stepped in without hesitation, his boots sending up small splashes. Stay in the water when you can. Masks are scent, if scent matters, which we don't know for certain. Also keeps us on a straight path south toward the center. The creek became our highway. We walked single file through water that numbed our feet within minutes. Devin had to be carried now. Kai lifted him piggyback, and the boy held on without speaking, his face pressed between Kai's shoulder blades. I was watching our six, turning every few steps to check behind us. The trees were thick, and visibility was limited to maybe 50 feet in any direction. Every shadow could be a threat. Every distant crack of a branch sent electricity through my spine. 40 minutes into the creek walk, Sophia suddenly whispered from behind me, "Stop, I see one." I turned. She was pointing left, into the trees on the eastern bank. I followed her finger and saw it. A figure standing perfectly still among the pines about 40 feet away. Facing us, or facing our direction at least. Its head was tilted at an angle that suggested listening. We stood in the water, motionless, 8 people barely breathing. It didn't move. We didn't move. 60 seconds passed like 60 years. It turned away. Some other stimulus, a bird, a falling branch, something beyond our perception, drew its attention, and it shuffled deeper into the woods, disappearing behind the gray curtain of fog and timber. I didn't exhale until it was fully gone. Marcus gave the signal, and we continued. But the encounter had shattered whatever false security the creek corridor had provided. We were not invisible. We were not safe. We were 8 warm bodies moving through a world that now belonged to something else. And our continued existence was a matter of luck rather than strategy. By 10 a.m., we'd covered approximately 6 miles. Devin had walked the last stretch himself, seemingly energized by a granola bar and the simple determination of a 10-year-old who wanted to prove he wasn't a burden. My feet were numb from the creek, but the water had warmed slightly as the fog burned off, and weak sunlight penetrated the canopy. We stopped at a clearing where the creek bent sharply west. Marcus consulted the map and frowned. "Problem," he said quietly, drawing me and Sophia close while the others rested. "The creek diverges from our path here. We need to go south. The creek goes west. From here to the community center, it's about 6 miles overland. Open suburban territory for the first 2 miles, then commercial district, then residential again near the center." "Open territory," I repeated. "Fields, a school campus, a strip mall, limited cover." Sophia shook her head. "We just came through relatively safe wooded terrain. You want to take us through open ground?" "I want to take us to safety. This is the route." I looked at the group. Devin was sitting on a rock, swinging his feet. Mrs. Alderman was rubbing her calves, grimacing. Carmen was taking small sips from a water bottle, conserving each one. Kai and Mara were standing together, watching the trees with the focused alertness of people running on nothing but cortisol. "How fast can we move through the open section?" I asked. "If we push hard, 40 minutes, maybe 30 if everyone keeps pace." "And if we encounter a group like the parking lot?" "Then we use the shotgun and we run. No other option in open ground." The honesty of that statement settled over us. There was no clever strategy for open terrain. There was only speed, and failing that, violence. We left the creek at 10:30. The tree line ended abruptly, giving way to a wide field that belonged to an elementary school. The school itself sat in the middle distance, a low brick building with colorful murals on its exterior walls. Playground equipment stood empty in primary colors against the gray sky. Swings moved slightly in the wind, creating an illusion of recent use. The field was clear. We moved quickly, 8 people jogging across trimmed grass, our shoes leaving tracks in the morning dew. Halfway across, Devin stumbled and I scooped him up without breaking stride, settling him on my hip like I'd seen mothers do 1,000 times. He weighed almost nothing. He wrapped his arms around my neck and held tight. We cleared the field and reached the school's parking lot. Empty. The front entrance had its lights off, doors closed. A banner hung over the main doors. Fall Harvest Festival, October 28th. An event that would never happen. Beyond the school, a road. Beyond the road, a strip mall. And in the strip mall parking lot, which was vast and open and offered no cover whatsoever, I counted approximately 30 infected wandering among abandoned cars. Marcus led us to the edge of the school building, and we pressed against the brick wall, peering around the corner. "That's the direct route," he said. "Straight through that lot and out the south exit puts us in the residential zone, 2 miles from the center." "We can't cross that lot," Mara said flatly. 30 of them minimum, open ground, a child. She was right, and Marcus knew it. "Alternative?" I asked. He studied the map again, tongue pressed against his cheek. "We go east, around the commercial zone entirely. Adds 2 miles, but keeps us in residential the whole way. 2 more miles, 2 more hours, with tired legs and limited water." "East," I said. Everyone agreed. Everyone except Kai. "We keep going around," Kai said, his voice carrying an edge I hadn't heard before. "Every time there's an obstacle, we add distance. We add time. My mom is out there somewhere, and every extra mile we walk is another hour she might be." "Kai," Mara's voice was gentle but firm. "We're all trying to reach people. Are we? Because it feels like we're trying to reach a community center that might not even be operational, while everyone we actually care about is somewhere else." He was standing apart from the group now, his body language separating himself physically from our collective decision. "My house is 4 miles north. I could be there in under 2 hours. Alone," I said. "If I have to." "That's suicide," Sophia said bluntly. "You don't know that. We've barely encountered any on this whole trip. The woods are clear. The back streets are..." "The back streets are unknown," Marcus cut in. "You've seen one route. The direction you're talking about takes you back toward the school, toward the denser population center. More people live there. More people died there. More of them exist there. The math is simple." Kai's jaw worked. I could see the tendons in his neck standing out. This wasn't stubbornness. This was anguish weaponized into frustration. He hadn't heard from his mother since before we left Jefferson High. That was over 36 hours of silence from the person who'd raised him alone, who'd worked double shifts as a nurse to keep him in decent shoes and AP classes. I stepped toward him. Not confrontationally, slowly, with my palms visible, the way you might approach someone on a ledge. "Kai, listen to me. If your mom is alive, and she's smart, and she's strong, and she's probably alive, then the best thing you can do is get to somewhere safe and be findable. If she's looking for you, she's going to check evacuation centers, not your house." His eyes glistened. I watched him fight it. Fight the emotion, fight the logic, fight the terrible possibility that sat beneath everything he was saying. "You don't know that," he whispered. But the fight was leaving his shoulders. "I don't. But I know that going alone is the one choice that guarantees we can't help you if something goes wrong. A beat. 2 beats. A bird called somewhere in the trees. Devon shifted in Mrs. Alderman's arms, watching the exchange with those enormous, silent eyes. "Fine," Kai said. He said it like surrender, like loss. I felt the weight of his capitulation settle on my shoulders, and again I accepted it because the alternative was losing him. We went east. The residential streets on this side of the commercial zone were older, smaller houses, denser together. They offered better cover, shorter distances between points of concealment, but also more blind corners, more places for threats to emerge without warning. Marcus adjusted our formation. Tighter now, less distance between each person. He moved us down the center of streets where possible, maintaining maximum distance from both sides and their hidden yards. At 11:45, we encountered our first body. Not infected, truly dead. A man face down on a front lawn, a garden rake still in his hand. The back of his head was destroyed, and the grass around him was dark brown with dried blood. But he wasn't moving. He hadn't turned. "Head trauma prevents reanimation," Marcus observed clinically. "Good to confirm." I tried not to look at the man's house, at the front door standing open behind him, at whatever had happened inside that drove him to fight with a garden rake. I tried not to think about who he'd been defending. We passed 3 more scenes like this over the next mile. Houses with broken windows, cars with open doors and blood on seats. Evidence of violence without the violent parties present. They'd moved on, following whatever stimuli called them elsewhere, leaving behind only the truly dead and the silence. At noon, we stopped in a garage with its door pulled mostly closed. 8 people eating crackers and dried fruit in the dark, listening to the world outside. 5 miles from a salvation none of us could verify existed. The garage belonged to a house that was clearly empty. Door locked, mail piled on the porch, no vehicles. A vacation home, maybe, or someone who'd evacuated early. We rested for 20 minutes while Marcus checked the radio again. The emergency broadcast had changed. The evacuation center list was shorter now. 2 of the previously named locations were no longer mentioned. George Mason Community Center was still listed, still directing people south on Route 7. But the voice reading the announcement sounded different. Recorded, yes, but with a quality that suggested it had been made more recently. Less polished, more urgent. "Still active," Marcus said. "That's enough for me." We moved again at 12:25. The residential streets continued south, and the density of infected seemed to thin as we progressed. Whether this was because we were moving away from population centers or because they were migrating somewhere else, I couldn't tell. But the effect was welcome. We covered the next mile, seeing only 2. Both distant, both in standby mode, both avoided easily. Then we heard the horn again. That same deep, resonant sound I'd heard at 3 a.m. from Mara's kitchen window. Closer now. Much closer. Coming from somewhere southwest, the direction we were heading. It lasted 5 or 6 seconds. A single, sustained tone that wasn't mechanical and wasn't natural and wasn't anything I could categorize. The effect was immediate and dramatic. From every direction, behind us, to our sides, from houses and yards and alleys, infected began to move. Not toward us. Southwest. Toward the horn. "What the hell is that?" Carmen breathed. Marcus was watching them converge. 4 passed within 60 feet of our position, moving with that broken gait, but with unusual purpose. They didn't look at us, didn't react to us. Their attention was locked on that sound with a totality that overrode their normal environmental responsiveness. "It's calling them," Sophia said. Something is calling them, Marcus corrected. Whether it's deliberate or incidental, the effect is the same. They're being drawn in a specific direction. The direction we need to go, I added. He nodded grimly. If something is collecting them southwest of here, and the community center is south of here, they might be gathering near the center, or near whatever is making that sound, which may or may not be the same location. The group fell silent. The implications were catastrophic. If the evacuation center was attracting infected, whether through the noise of human activity or through this unknown horn, then our destination wasn't safety. It was a convergence point. We still go, Mara said. Everyone looked at her. She stood straight-backed, the chef's knife in a sheath she'd improvised from duct tape and cardboard at her hip. We still go because every other option is worse. We go, and when we get close enough to see what we're dealing with, we make a decision then, but we don't stop walking because of a sound. Marcus actually smiled. Small, brief, but real. The lady's right. We adapt on approach. Let's move. We moved, but the energy had changed. The infected flowing past us toward the southwest created an eerie corridor effect. We were moving perpendicular to their stream, cutting across their migration path. Some passed close enough that I could hear the sound they made, that wet resonance in their chests, like lungs full of fluid trying to function. I smelled them for the first time, too. Not rot. Something chemical and astringent, like formaldehyde mixed with copper. The scent of preserved death. Devin buried his face in his mother's neck, and she walked with her eyes fixed forward, jaw set, a woman navigating a river of the damned with her child in her arms. We cleared the migration stream in about 10 minutes. Beyond it, the streets were empty. Completely, unnervingly empty. The infected had all answered the call, leaving behind a ghost town of abandoned houses and silent roads. Our footsteps echoed. At 1:30 p.m., we saw the first sign for Route 7, and with it, in the distance, the rooftop of George Mason Community Center. Smoke was rising from somewhere behind it. We approached from the east, using a bank of trees along a drainage ditch for cover. The community center was a large single-story building, maybe 20,000 square feet, the kind of multi-purpose civic structure that hosted basketball leagues and town meetings and blood drives. Its parking lot was full, 50 or 60 vehicles at least. And a perimeter had been established using overturned cars, dumpsters, and lengths of chain-link fencing wired together. People moved behind the barriers, living people. I saw green military uniforms among them, and several figures in civilian clothes carrying rifles. A tent had been erected near the main entrance, the kind of large canvas military tent used for triage. The smoke I'd seen was rising from behind the building, and as we circled east, I saw its source. A burn pile. Stacked bodies, charred beyond recognition, being fed into flames by 2 soldiers wearing masks. "It's real," Carmen whispered. There were tears on her face. "It's actually real." Marcus straightened from his crouch. "Let's make ourselves visible, slowly. Hands up, weapons visible but non-threatening. They'll have nervous guards, and I don't want to be shot by friendlies." We emerged from the tree line in a group, walking slowly toward the perimeter. I held the 9-iron across my body in both hands, visible but unthreatening. Marcus had the shotgun broken open over his arm, barrels pointed at the ground. A guard on the perimeter spotted us within 30 seconds. He raised a megaphone. "Stop where you are. How many in your group?" 8, Marcus called back. 1 child, all uninjured, all clean. "Any bites? Any scratches from contact with infected?" "Negative. We've avoided direct contact." A pause. Conversation among the guards. Then, proceed to the intake tent. Keep your weapons visible. You'll surrender them at the gate. We walked the final 100 yards with a mixture of exhaustion and relief that made my legs feel simultaneously leaden and weightless. Mara's hand found mine, and she squeezed hard enough to make the bones ache. Kai was breathing audibly, rapid and shallow. Mrs. Alderman was crying silently. Devon perched on her hip, staring at the soldiers with something between wonder and suspicion. At the gate, a gap in the chain link wide enough for one person at a time, we were met by a sergeant in combat fatigues. He was maybe 35, clean-shaven, with eyes that had seen far too much in the past 48 hours. He carried a clipboard. Names, he said. Ages. Any medical conditions. Any medications needed. Any military or medical training. We gave our information one by one. Marcus identified himself as a retired Marine, and the sergeant's posture shifted subtly. Recognition, respect, resource assessment. You'll be housed in the gym area. Space is limited. We have approximately 300 civilians currently. Water is available but rationed. 2 meals a day. Medical tent is for emergencies only. What's the plan? Marcus asked. The sergeant looked at him with the particular exhaustion of a man maintaining order in a situation that had no playbook. Hold position. Await evacuation. Helicopter extraction was attempted yesterday, but the landing zone was compromised. Next attempt in 72 hours. 72 hours, I said. What about the infected gathering to the southwest? We heard a horn. The sergeant's eyes sharpened. You heard it? Twice, and we saw them responding, moving toward it. He made a note on his clipboard. We're aware. They've been congregating about a mile southwest of here. Large group, several hundred at least. So far, they haven't moved toward the center. He paused. So far. The weight of those 2 words settled over all of us. We were processed, surrendered our weapons to a collection point, and directed through the intake tent where a medic did a cursory examination of each person, checking for bites, scratches, fever. We all passed. Inside the community center gymnasium, 300 lives existed in organized misery. Cots lined the floor in rows. Children sat in clusters near a corner designated as a play area. Adults stood in lines for water, for information, for the bathrooms. The noise was constant. Muffled conversations, occasional crying, the squeak of shoes on hardwood. We'd made it, but making it and being safe were 2 entirely different things. The first 12 hours inside the center felt like decompression. Physical tension released from my muscles in stages, like air from a slow leak. Mara and I found adjacent cots in a corner and lay facing each other, knees touching, speaking in whispers about nothing and everything. Mrs. Alderman finally slept, truly slept, with Devon curled against her on a cot that was too small for 2, but held them both. Kai plugged his phone into a charging station the military had set up and immediately began calling his mother again. Still no answer. Marcus disappeared into conversation with the sergeant and several other military personnel. He returned 2 hours later, looking both more informed and more concerned, a combination that didn't inspire confidence. Give it to me straight, I said. We were standing near the water distribution point, paper cups in hand. The situation is worse than they're saying publicly. This center is one of 11 originally established in the Tri-County area. As of this morning, only 4 are still operational. The others were overrun. I let that sink in. Overrun how? The perimeter here seems solid. The perimeters were solid at the others too. but the infected are demonstrating behavioral evolution. That horn we heard, they don't know what it is, but they know what it does. It congregates them, and when they congregate in sufficient numbers, they don't stay in standby. They become active, agitated. They start pushing against whatever boundary exists between them and stimulus. The people inside are the stimulus. 300 living bodies, heartbeats, breathing, conversation, movement. To them, we're a dinner bell. So the horn gathers them, and our presence keeps them focused. That appears to be the pattern. The centers that fell had populations above 500. The theory is there's a critical mass, enough infected in proximity, and they overwhelm any barrier. How many are gathered southwest of here? Marcus drank his water. As of the last scout report, between 400 and 600. My cup nearly slipped from my fingers. 600. And our perimeter is chain link and overturned cars? With 23 armed guards and approximately 800 rounds of ammunition. He paused. I'm not telling the others. Not yet. Not until I have more information or a plan. Marcus, I know. But panic in a closed space with 300 people and limited exits creates its own disaster. Give me 12 hours. I gave him 12 hours. It was one of the harder things I've done. Lying on that cot beside Mara, listening to her breathe, knowing what was possibly coming, and choosing not to wake her with it. At midnight, the horn sounded again, closer than before. So close that the walls of the gymnasium seemed to absorb the vibration. People stirred on their cots. A few sat up. A child started crying in the darkness. The guards outside could be heard moving, shouting brief commands. Then silence. The worst silence. The kind that exists between trigger and bullet. I found Marcus in the hallway near the intake entrance. He was wearing his coat, and his face was drawn tight. They moved, he said. The main group. They're now approximately half a mile southwest. The scouts confirm visual. Half a mile? At their pace, that's 20 minutes. Maybe less if something triggers a rush. What do we do? He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd met this man, this retired Marine, this rock of competence and authority, I saw doubt. Genuine uncertainty in the lines around his eyes and the set of his mouth. We prepare two things simultaneously, he said. We prepare to defend this position, and we prepare to evacuate on foot if defense fails. He gripped my shoulder. Get your people ready, quietly. Tell them to sleep in their shoes. I returned to my cot, and I woke Mara with a hand on her arm. Her eyes opened instantly. She hadn't really been sleeping. I told her everything. Her face moved through shock, anger, calculation, and resolve in the space of 4 seconds. I'll wake the others, she said. By 2 a.m., our group was ready. Bags packed, shoes tied, weapons reclaimed from the collection point. Marcus had convinced the sergeant to return them, given the evolving situation. The shotgun felt heavier now, its potential use no longer theoretical. But we weren't the only ones preparing. Word had spread, as it always does in enclosed communities despite every effort at containment. The gymnasium was alive with whispered conversations and the rustle of hurried packing. People were pulling on coats, gathering children, arguing in hushed voices about whether to stay or run. The sergeant appeared in the doorway at 2:30 with a megaphone and a very thin patience. Everyone remain calm. The perimeter is secure. Our guards are alert and our defenses are in place. There is no immediate threat. I repeat, no immediate threat. Return to your cots. Some people listened. Most didn't. The atmosphere had crossed a threshold that no authority could walk back with words alone. Fear had become a physical presence in the room, as real as the cots and the concrete walls. At 3:15, the horn sounded again. This time, it went on for nearly 15 seconds. And this time, it was followed by another sound, the collective vocalization of hundreds of infected responding. That wet, chest-deep resonance, multiplied by hundreds of throats, creating a drone that I felt in my sternum. The gymnasium went silent, 300 people holding their breath simultaneously. Then the gunfire started. Single shots first, measured, disciplined. The guards engaging advancing infected from the perimeter. Pop, 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 each one precise. Then faster, overlapping, multiple shooters, the discipline fragmenting into urgency. "That's not holding," Marcus said. He was already moving toward the rear exit of the gymnasium, a fire door that led to the back parking lot. "Everyone, now. We go now." Our group moved, 8 people cutting through the suddenly mobile crowd of 300, all of whom had the same idea, but less preparation. The gymnasium became a crush. Bodies pushing toward every exit simultaneously. The fire door, the main entrance, the side emergency exits. A child screamed. An elderly man fell and was nearly trampled before someone hauled him up. We hit the fire door and burst into cold night air. The back parking lot was chaos, people pouring from every exit, scattering in different directions. The military vehicles were still parked in a row, but nobody was in them. Every soldier was at the perimeter, and the perimeter was failing. I could see it from where I stood, the chain link on the southwest corner buckling inward as bodies pressed against it. Not pushed with hands, pressed, the weight of dozens of infected leaning against the fence with the simple, mindless pressure of a crowd. The physics were undeniable. No fence holds against that. "North," Marcus shouted. "The tree line we came from." We ran north across the parking lot. Behind us, the fence gave way with a metallic shriek that was immediately drowned by the sound of the infected pouring through. Gunfire became continuous, then frantic, then punctuated by screams. I was carrying Devin again. The boy's arms were around my neck so tight I could barely breathe. His face was in my shoulder, and his body was rigid with terror he had no way to process. Mrs. Alderman ran beside me, her hand on my back as if she could push us both faster. We reached the tree line, the drainage ditch, plunged into it and kept moving, branches whipping at faces, roots threatening ankles. Behind us, the community center was being consumed. Lights were flickering. The sound was a symphony of violence that I cannot describe without feeling it again in my chest. We ran until we couldn't hear it anymore. 5 minutes, 10. The trees swallowed the sound gradually, each step buying a degree of silence, until finally, heaving and shaking in a clearing half a mile north, we stopped. 8 people, alive, again in the wilderness. All our supposed safety, gone in under 3 minutes. We collapsed in that clearing like puppets with severed strings. Mrs. Alderman sank to the ground and pulled Devin into her lap, rocking him without words. Carmen was hyperventilating, her sister pressing both hands on her shoulders and talking rapidly in Spanish. Comfort language, mother tongue soothing. Kai stood apart, staring back the way we'd come, his silhouette rigid against the gray trees. Mara sat beside me, and our hands found each other in the darkness. Her palm was ice cold, but her grip was iron. Marcus was the first to recover. He always was. He checked each person methodically. Injuries, mental state, supplies. Our bags were intact. We'd grabbed them in the gymnasium, and they'd stayed on our backs through the sprint. We still had food for a day, water for half that. The shotgun, the knife, the crowbar. We'd lost the 9-iron somewhere in the panic. My hands had been full of Devon. But it was a small loss in the calculus of survival. "We need to keep moving," Marcus said. His voice was steady, but carried a new quality. Not doubt exactly, but the awareness that his marine confidence needed recalibration. The evacuation center had been his plan. It had failed. Now we were back to pure improvisation. Dawn in about 2 hours. We find shelter before that, somewhere defensible, somewhere they won't find us. Where? The question came from Mrs. Alderman, and it carried a weight that was almost accusatory. "You said the center would be safe, you said." Marcus absorbed it without defense. "I don't know yet, but we move north, away from the convergence zone. We find a structure, we rest. We plan our next step with daylight and clear heads." We moved, slower now, exhaustion saturating every muscle. Devon was asleep somehow, true unconsciousness, his body's mercy response to overwhelming trauma. I carried him again, his weight nothing against the weight of everything else. The woods gave way eventually to another suburban street, this one unfamiliar, darker, further from the main roads. Houses lined both sides, all dark, all silent. Cars in driveways, normal lives frozen at the moment of abandonment. Marcus chose a house at random. No, not random. He chose one with a brick exterior, single-story, small windows, attached garage. Defensible characteristics assessed in seconds by a mind trained for exactly this. The back door yielded to the crowbar. We entered and cleared the house room by room, a practice that was now habitual, that none of us questioned or resisted. Empty. The owners had left. Clothes still in the closets, food in the pantry, a dog bed in the kitchen corner with no dog. We barricaded the doors, covered the windows, and settled into the living room. 7 adults and 1 child in a stranger's house, surrounded by their family photos and throw pillows and a bookshelf organized alphabetically by author. Dawn arrived through the cracks in the blinds, golden, warm, offensive in its beauty. I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against the wall, and I thought about what I'd seen. The center falling, the fence buckling, the sound of 300 people learning simultaneously that safety was an illusion. Some of them had gotten out. I'd seen others running into the tree line, into the streets, but some hadn't. Mara sat across from me, her knees drawn up, watching me think. After a long silence, she said, "We need a different kind of plan." "What kind?" "We've been reacting, running toward whatever authority tells us is safe. It wasn't safe. The school wasn't safe. The house was temporary. The center collapsed. We need to think for ourselves." She was right. Every decision we'd made had been pointed towards someone else's salvation. The evacuation center, the military, the idea that somewhere adults had it figured out. Nobody had it figured out. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stop looking for rescue and start building survival. In that moment, 17-year-old Mara Chen became something else entirely. The girl I'd loved for easy, adolescent reasons became someone I followed for reasons far more fundamental. Over the next 2 days, we transformed. Not physically, though the physical changes were accumulating. We were thinner, harder, our movements more economical, but in orientation. We stopped thinking in terms of rescue and started thinking in terms of establishment. This house became home base. Not permanent, but intentional. Marcus and I scouted the immediate area. The street held 12 houses. 9 were empty and accessible. The other 3 contained the dead, truly dead, head trauma, not reanimating. We searched every empty house and consolidated supplies: canned goods, bottled water, blankets, tools, batteries, candles. We filled Mara's improvised armory with kitchen knives, garden implements, a small hatchet from someone's woodshed. Mara organized the interior. She was unsentimental and efficient, qualities that had previously expressed themselves in academic achievement and now redirected towards survival logistics. She created zones in the house: sleeping area, supply storage, lookout positions, a quiet space for Devon that Mrs. Alderman could control. Kai found his purpose in technology. He rigged a car battery from a neighbor's garage to a phone charger, extending our communication window. He monitored radio frequencies obsessively and began logging patterns. When the horn sounded, which directions the infected moved, how long their active periods lasted. His data suggested a rhythm: the horn every 8 to 12 hours, migration southwest primarily, active periods lasting roughly 40 minutes following the horn. "There's a window after each horn call," he explained on the second evening, his notebook spread on the kitchen counter. "Once they migrate, this area empties for 4 to 6 hours. That's when we should do supply runs. That's when we move." It was brilliant. Survival through pattern recognition. Not fighting the enemy, but understanding its behavior well enough to exist in its margins. Sophia and Carmen became our perimeter team. They maintained watch in rotating 4-hour shifts, one at the front of the house and one at the back, equipped with binoculars and instructions to wake the house at the first sign of approach. Mrs. Alderman took charge of food preparation and rationing, applying a maternal precision to caloric distribution that ensured everyone ate enough to function without depleting our reserves faster than we could replenish them. Devon helped her, measuring portions, counting cans, learning math through necessity rather than worksheets. By the third day, we had a functioning household. Not comfortable, not safe in any absolute sense, but operational, sustainable for the medium term, and most importantly, self-directed. That evening, I stood watch at the front window while the others ate. The street was empty, washed in that particular golden light of late October sunset. A leaf blew across the road. Somewhere, a gutter dripped. The world was beautiful and terrible and completely transformed. Kai appeared beside me. He'd been quieter since the evacuation center. The failure of his phone to reach his mother had calcified it into something I recognized but couldn't name. An acceptance that wasn't peace and wasn't despair, but existed somewhere between them. "I'm going to find her," he said. Not urgently, not with the frantic energy of that first argument on the road. With calm, with plan. "I know," I said, "and when you do, we'll help. The next horn cycle, when the area clears, I'll take the north route." "You won't go alone." He looked at me. His best friend since 5th grade. The person who'd sat next to me in every class that allowed self-selected seating. "You'd come." Of course I'd come. But not just me. We plan it properly. Marcus leads. We plan the route. We time the window. We bring weapons. And we bring you to your mom. His eyes were bright, but he didn't cry. He'd moved past that. We both had. We existed now in a space beyond tears. A post-emotional landscape where grief and determination were the same thing expressed through different actions. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me. We're family, all 8 of us now." That was the truth of it. Not the family we were born into, the family that was forged by running through fire together. The rescue mission for Kai's mother launched on day 4. Marcus, Kai, Sophia, and I left during the post-horn window, moving north through the familiar residential streets with weapons drawn and timing sharp. Kai's house was 4 miles through territory we now understood, territory with rhythms we could predict and exploit. We moved in the infected's wake. The street they'd vacated was littered with evidence of their passage. Scuff marks on asphalt, a mailbox knocked askew, a fence post splintered by the press of bodies. But the bodies themselves were gone, migrated southwest, pulled by whatever force that horn represented. Kai's house was on a street called Foxglove Lane, a modest ranch-style home with a yellow door and a garden his mother maintained with devotion. We approached carefully, checking sight lines, watching for stragglers. The yellow door was locked, the windows intact. A good sign. Kai's hand shook as he turned his key and pushed the door open. "Mom?" His voice cracked on the word. "Mom, it's me." Silence. The house smelled stale, but not wrong. No decay, no violence. We moved through rooms, his bedroom still a mess of basketball shoes and textbooks, the kitchen clean, the bathroom tidy, and found nothing. No person, no body. Then Kai checked the basement, a finished space his mother used as a home office. The door was locked from the inside. He knocked. "Mom, it's Kai. I'm here." 5 seconds of silence that stretched into infinity. Then the sound of a deadbolt turning. And the door opened. And there she was. Marguerite Johnson. 5 feet 4 inches of exhaustion and relief and disbelief. She fell into her son's arms, and he held her, and the sound he made was the sound of someone discovering they still had something to lose. She'd been alone for 4 days, locked in the basement with bottled water and crackers, listening to the world through the concrete, afraid to come up. She hadn't been bitten, hadn't been found. She'd simply hidden and survived through the most basic mammalian instinct. Stay small, stay quiet, stay alive. We brought her back, 9 now. The formation adjusted, absorbed, continued. She was weak from days of limited food and sleep, but she walked under her own power. One hand on Kai's arm, her other hand gripping a piece of pipe, a knife that Marcus had given her. The return trip was clean. We arrived at base with 50 minutes of window remaining, slipping inside and locking the door behind us. Marguerite was immediately enveloped by Mrs. Alderman, who produced food and water and a blanket with a maternal efficiency that accepted no argument. That night, something shifted in our collective. Finding Marguerite, alive, recoverable, salvageable, proved something none of us had dared articulate. That the people we'd lost contact with might still exist somewhere. That rescue wasn't exclusively the domain of institutions. That 8, now 9, ordinary people with knowledge and timing and courage could accomplish what had seemed impossible. "We can do this," Mara said that night, lying beside me on the living room floor. Not a question, a declaration. Whatever comes, however long this takes, we can do this. I believed her, not because the situation had improved. It hadn't, not meaningfully. The infected were still out there. The horn still sounded. The world was still broken. But we had adapted. We had built something from nothing. We had chosen each other, and that choice was proving sufficient against the mathematics of catastrophe. I was 17. 7 days earlier, my biggest concern had been a chemistry quiz I was failing. Now I was part of something that functioned, that protected, that endured. The distance between those two realities was so vast that the person who'd broken his pencil tip on covalent bond questions felt like a stranger from another life. He was. I was someone else now. We all were. The horn sounded at midnight. The infected moved, and we remained in our house on our street with our people, watching the monsters pass by like weather, waiting for morning to resume the work of staying alive. I tell this story now from a distance that is measured not in miles, but in selves. The person I was on that ordinary October afternoon, bored, 17, failing a quiz, no longer exists. He was dissolved by acid circumstance and reformed into someone harder, quieter, more present. We lost the world we knew in an afternoon. We lost the illusion of safety in a night. We lost the belief in institutional rescue at a community center that lasted exactly 3 minutes against the weight of the dead. But we found something in exchange. Not hope. Hope is too passive a word. We found function. We found each other. We found that 9 people operating in trust and discipline could carve a space inside catastrophe and hold it. Mara was right. We stopped waiting for rescue. We became our own answer. The infected still move out there, governed by their horn, following patterns we've mapped and memorized. The world is quieter now, emptier, but not lifeless. Life persists in the spaces between the monsters, small, deliberate, earned. I'm still 17. But I've lived more in these weeks than most people accumulate in decades. We thought school was closing early. Then we saw the zombies. Then we became something they couldn't consume.